Hi everybody, let me get you back to the start here. So we're on Confucianism this week. I want to talk first about the context of Confucianism. Um, from a modern standpoint, I suppose true also in the past, but it's very difficult to know how many Confucians there are in the world. We know it's most significant in China, and the basis of Confucianism is the basis for much of how the Chinese society organizes itself. So you're talking about 1.4 billion people. Yet people who identify officially as Confucians are a pretty small number. There's also Confucians practicing in surrounding countries and in Chinese communities in other parts of the world, including our own. You will see evidence of Confucianism when you walk into Chinese restaurants, for instance, and in communities like Chinatown, in almost any part of the world, London, New York, San Francisco. There is a movie here that you can watch to get background on Confucianism. It'll tell you about the warring period of China, which is when Confucius lived, and what drove him, what was really his motivation for trying to come up with a system that would better organize society. What has happened is the empire has fallen apart. There are sets of warlords across China. These are, I think, what representing those warlords, and they each control some part, and they're constantly trying to get more power. So there's a lot of war. Life expectancy is very low, and modern day life is pretty chaotic. So the Zhao dynasty was the last relatively stable dynasty from 1046 to 771 BCE. Not a bad run, really, almost 300 years. But then from 771 to 475, there were these feudal kingdoms that sprung up. It's kind of like what happened with the Roman Empire, right? When it fell apart, then we had these large kingdoms that later become the countries of Europe in one way, shape, or form. So the feudal kingdoms, of course, had designs on one another. I'm sure there were resources that one kingdom had that another wanted: land, people, who knows what. But it initiated a warring period from 475 to 221, when war and pretty much widespread chaos was the order of the day. And to make matters worse, the crossbow was invented during this period of time, and that really made it possible for warring kingdoms to decimate the opposition if they owned a crossbow, as opposed to the other side not. So it really drove up casualties. A man named Confucius was born during the decline of the Zhao dynasty in 551. You'll learn about this in the video, so I'm not going to go through every bit of this, but it's interesting to note that his father died. His father was a bureaucrat working for one of in the kingdom. His father died, and he and his brother lived in poverty. And Confucius became Confucius when Western Europeans started documenting what was going on in China. So that's why we have the terminology Confucianism. Confucius was supporting his mother and brother as a herder and an accountant at a granary. Now, being an accountant at a granary is a pretty good job at this period of time. And during this time, because of all the unrest, thinkers are trying to figure out how to put this society back together. This is not optimal, right, for how to live a chaotic, warring environment, to be at war all the time with your neighbors. The instability and such limits how much a country can really do to make itself strong. You're kind of in a constant state of weakness. So during this time, there are many people. It's called the 100 schools of thought. Whether there was 100 or not, no way to know. 100 schools of thought just simply means a lot of dudes walking around trying to explain what would be best for society to do. And some of them had, metaphysical supernatural systems that involved the gods. But Confucius or Confucius was not one of those people. In fact, he and many of his rivals focused their energy on the present. Not all of them, but many of them. In Confucius, I'll get back to calling him Confucius in a minute. He was one of those people. So think about this. While this is going on, the Greeks are debating whether women are actually human, and Confucians are affirming that women can become profound persons and sages. So that's how advanced over this frothy little 100 schools of thought, how powerful this period of time was in China in propelling many of its ideas forward. This is a good look at some of the rival schools. The Mohists were the largest philosophical school. They really had a vibe, something like the very earliest manifestations of Christianity. So think of this as being a philosophy that emphasized love, that thought through living together in harmony and loving one another, a kingdom of order could descend. So like a kingdom of God in Jesus's time, when he taught about a kingdom on earth in which love was the dominant motif, and in this way the Mohists were the same. So they had a very positive view of humanity. The legalists, not so much. They were second to the Mohists, and they believed that human beings were inherently flawed, even wicked, and that religion and education was really not going to do it for humans. You couldn't teach them how to behave. So the only option that the legalists felt were the threat or use of force. So the legalists basically would set up laws that exemplified the behavior they wanted out of the human, and then the disciplining of the humans against those laws was how they felt like society could be best organized. So ultimately, as you might imagine, maybe, the idea that love was the key. And love is, in this case, not a Hallmark card, right? This is not the flowery stuff we say to one another on Valentine's Day. This is more of a commitment we make to one another. So Mencius, from 371 to 289, really took the Mohist mantle and ran with it. He was born about a century after Confucius's death, and he not only furthered the cause of the Mohists, but he blended that with Confucianism, and believed that humans were inclined towards goodness. We had, this is not him saying that we don't have problems or we don't have flaws. We do. But he said overall, if you gave a human a proper environment, that humans were inclined towards goodness as surely as water is inclined to flow down a hill. Zunzi was furthered the legalisms or legalist basis, and he was born a bit before his rival Mencius died. He was convinced, like a legalist, right, that human nature was evil, and it was ultimately Mencius that won, and this became the hook, I guess you could say, for Confucianism becoming a tradition that affirms not only the possibility of human moral perfection, but also its innate goodness, the innate goodness of human nature. So this is a big shift, right? I mean, we have a very in the United States, we have a very Christian-oriented past, right? Not the country wasn't. I'm not suggesting the country was founded to be a Christian nation, though that is a thing debated. I don't believe that's true based on the history I've studied, but we definitely were heavily influenced by religious refugees, if you will, that were fleeing religious persecution and saw North America as an opportunity to establish a new Jerusalem in the case of the Puritans. So you've got that, which was based on, you got Christianity based on humans being originally sinful and sinful also in their lives. So humans are more seen more in Christianity through what the legalists in China were advocating. So our country has that as an underpinning, while China has this idea of human moral perfection being possible. Now, it's just one of the first places you're going to come in and run into this complete dialectic between how the world is seen by the people of the United States overall versus the philosophies that permeate China. And it explains a lot about why we in China have trouble getting along today. Oops, going backwards, sorry. There was a rise of Neo-Confucianism. You can read about that here. It was simply like the versions of schisms and Reformation and all that Christianity went through. Confucianism also did, and in this case, it was so they could adopt some of the principles of Buddhism and Taoism. And remember, these three, Confucianism, Buddhism, Taoism, are all part of many Chinese lives. I mean, they may hold principles from all three and practice all three in one way, shape, or form. So Neo-Confucianism may have laid the groundwork for that. And it allowed Confucianism to continue its run. It also led to some reinterpretation of the Confucian classic text and shifted a little bit more emphasis from society to the individuals. When we talk about the content of Confucianism, you'll see what I mean. All right. The analytics, I'm sorry, now we're in the content. I was looking at this analytics behind there. The analytics are one of the sacred texts of Confucianism, but let's talk about the content. The big three here. The problem is social chaos, right? The warring period. It makes perfect sense. The solution is social harmony. And in order to achieve social harmony and make the human as perfect as possible, then the human being must practice that which is unique to the human, and that is our humaneness. We are a species that, one of a few species that actually protects the vulnerable in our group. Will actually, work to incorporate people that are different into our tribe. Now, we also have the other response where people that we don't know are isolated, but within our own tribe, we will work in ways that aren't true of nature as it expresses itself, for instance, in a wolf pack, right? Wolf packs, they cull their members based on their usefulness to the overall group. We care for those in our group that can no longer produce, or at least that's our best selves when we do that. So this requires, for humaneness to come through, Confucianism believes that we must have ritual propriety, respect for hierarchy, big one here, and various methods of self-cultivation. So the problem is chaos, the answer is harmony, and the way it affects the lives of the people are in the various rituals and relationships that fill up their life and give it meaning. The analytics, these were compiled by the followers of Confucius in order to incorporate many of his dialogues and maxims and aphorisms. It provides guidance on ethics, morality, family relationships, governance, everything. These analytics are studied by Confucians, and they're part also of what is expected to be learned in the course of a Chinese education. All right. There were 5 classics written, and these were done by Confucius. So There are 5 different visions of life in these areas: the metaphysical, the poetic, the social, the historical, and political. These are more vital than the analytics, so the analytics are not for nothing. But these are the foundational, the essential documents of Confucianism. All right, within these documents, you will find concepts like Ren, and there are several in here. Ren is the Chinese word for, and here's the character, for humaneness, and it's how we embody compassion, empathy, and kindness. Those are the 3 measures of humaneness. In this, we go beyond simple obligation to one another. This is the genuine caring for the well-being of others. And this sounds a lot like the basic teachings of Jesus in Christianity in its early forms. All right, let me see if I can find the button. There we go. Li, I don't know. Don't trust my pronunciation. I'm sure that you can find a proper pronunciation online. So Ren is humaneness, Li is propriety, and that is the way of doing things. So I remember when I would pledge at a fraternity at the University of Kentucky, they taught, part of what they wanted to teach us was how to properly set a table, right? I mean, we were taught all sorts of things, right? So, but it was another level of socialization, right? That's what a fraternity basically does. And you know, you had to put forks on one side, spoons and stuff on the other. I don't remember any of that, but we were taught the right way of doing things, the right way of having manners for our tribe, the fraternity. And this is not just ceremonial stuff that goes on at the Confucian temple. This is everyday life. This governs our everyday actions in life and cultivates moral character. All right. Xiao or Chow, might be Chow. Let's see. Sigma Kaiao. This is Kaiao, maybe. And this is the respect or devotion to parents and elders. So this is the ancestral worship element of Confucianism that we've seen in other religions, indigenous religions like Yoruban, value the elders and place specific significance on their spiritual influence. That's not the case here. There's not another layer within Confucianism that pulls in the gods, not at least in the way that Confucius taught it. But the deal here is still the same. The root of all virtues is how you treat your family. So if you treat your family poorly and you have perfect manners in public, nobody trusts that, right? It's how you honor your parents that lays the groundwork for whether you can be a productive citizen or not. And this really centers the family relationships then are built out into the society. So at the top here, you've got 3 familial relationships, and then a relationship to a significant person that outside of your family. And all these really are the basis for this relationship. And each person in here has an obligation to the other. So it's just not one-way power, right? You don't just honor the son, not just honor the father because the father is the father. The father has to be a example of someone striving for humaneness, for propriety. So that earns the respect of the other. Okay, whoop, what happened there? What happened here? I don't know what. Oh, okay. I don't know what's going on. I must have pushed a button at the bottom. I'm sure I did. So the essence of these 5 relationships are justice. That's that individuals acting ethically, compassionate, empathetic. Trustworthiness is built on justice, and loyalty comes out of that. So if someone treats you justly, meaning someone, the ruler, your parents, your spouse, they are practicing a virtue that earns them your trust. So these relationships are asymmetrical in their power, right? The father has more power than the son, but that power is based on being a compassionate, empathetic, and moral person, and that builds for trustworthiness, and that builds from there for loyalty. So all these things, it's not just an org chart, right? In a business, we have an org chart, and you're supposed to do what the boss tells you to do from day one, whether you know the boss or not, right? Well, that might be okay for day one or two, but to be a good leader, if you are ever in that position in the company, you have to earn that. An org chart can't give it to you. And Confucianism is not teaching that we gain these responsibilities through just org charts. You have to demonstrate the ethical nature, the compassionate and empathetic nature that earns you the loyalty and trust. These relationships represent order. Let's see if I can get myself out of the way here. As you can see here in this quote, and all this boils down to what sounds as though remarkably like the golden rule, right? It's this familiar rule out of the Analects that serves as the foundation for Confucianism, which is pretty interesting. By the way, what we call the golden rule shows up in a number of religions. All right, so this is a video for you to watch that will be part of your assignment for this week. And this is an entrepreneur from China, and basically this talk explains meritocracy within China, and the meritocracy system within China is based on Confucianism, which you will see when you watch the movie. And then I'm going to ask you to do a little compare and contrast between the Confucian system and the democratic system that we use. One emphasizing the relationship between people within a society, and the other emphasizing the individual. There's a discussion around whether Confucianism is a philosophy or a religion. I'm not sure it matters, and I'm not sure we can even define what religion is without getting into the philosophical. It certainly is not necessary in Confucius's teachings. It does not have a supernatural feature, but there is something to be said about what overarching force is created by a harmonious society. You'll remember when we studied the Tao, right? The Tao is not divine in that sense either. It's not supernatural. It is the reality that we live in. We're not separate from it. It's not separate from us. It is the energy that flows through the universe. So it's hard to say. But scientists, you could argue that science is a religion if you want to go down that road, because scientists have biases. Every scientist has a bias. That doesn't mean that what they discover can't be useful, helpful, and functionally explain what happened. But many are the instances where somebody else had to come along and see something else that was obvious before, because the scientist carried into his work or her work a certain set of biases. So it's hard to know whether it's religion or philosophy. It's more interesting to debate than it is, I think, of importance. Like I said before, Confucius wasn't big on looking into the supernatural. Not yet being able to serve other people, how would you be able to serve the spirits? So he's saying, and Buddha will say this too, by the way. He's saying, why are you so anxious to find out about the spirits when you don't even know how to rightly, with propriety, treat one another? right? You might want to work on one another before you get too worried about the spirits. Buddha will say a very similar thing. So in China, it's a philosophy, not a religion. The official religions in China are Buddhism, Taoism, Islam, Protestantism, and Catholicism. Those are the five regulated religions. I think it's interesting that they put the Protestants and Catholics separate. Interesting, but they don't put the Sunnis and the Shia separate in Islam. It is, but it's very much, it's not included in that list of five because it's not treated as a religion. And if you look deep enough, virtually every textbook in the world has some Confucian influence in it. And we, have sayings that we use even in our own society pretty regularly that, and in principles that we align our life by that have Confucian elements in them. So anyway, you get the idea. It is more a way of life, a philosophy, a way of thinking about your life and the world and organizing yourself according to that. It's more like knowledge, power, in Foucault, but it's not philosophy. So you don't have to worry about it. Anyway, Confucianism came in via books primarily in the 1840s. We had periods where we barred immigrants from China, but at the same time, we are building buildings like the Supreme Court building with Confucius depicted on them. So we're a little ambiguous about how we feel about this early on. Mao Zedong in the 1960s and 70s led a revolution in China. It was an anti-authoritarian revolution. It was anti-class, so it was against the elite. It was against the educated. And so a lot of traditional culture, history, and religion were suppressed, including Confucianism. Now, in the 1980s, somebody looked around and said, well, wait a second, Confucianism is really good for organizing a society, right? I mean, if you get people to follow these relationships and treat one another with compassion, and trust, and loyalty, my God, I mean, what a good way to run a country. So, Confucianism was reinstated. So anyway, there was a lot of violence in this revolt, and ultimately, of course, the anti-elite became elitist, which is what happens in these. Same boss or new boss, same as old boss. There were deaths up to 2 million, but nothing like what we saw with Stalin in Russia. This is a Confucius wedding. You can watch this. Very, very interesting. But the government in China is pushing to reinvigorate many of the Confucian traditions because they realize what a good method of organization this is for a society, particularly a society with over 1 billion people in it, almost going on 1.5 billion. Watch this; it's very, very interesting. It's a very ornate wedding, and it's an emphasis of that relationship between husband and wife. There has been new Confucianism arise, and it's more of an emphasis on spirituality and religiosity. This is a form of Confucianism that you don't see in China as much as you might see in areas of Chinese diaspora, where Chinese have immigrated to other countries, Hong Kong, Singapore. Well, Hong Kong's now China, but Singapore, Taiwan, they would like Taiwan to be China in the United States. And this group has really worked on producing an authentic Confucius feminism and make these relationships that Confucius set up more inclusive, not male female. It's like father son. Why not father daughter? Why not mother son? That sort of thing. Trying to expand that to give it more relevance in today's time. It's not being woke, it's being relevant. I know. So I want you to think about this. This is the big question about why uh, China and the United States do not get along. And when we talk to each other, it's like we're talking past each other, where we're not even really able to communicate because our assumptions are so different. So think about these things. Is it all about politics, religion, or worldview, or is it something deeper than that? Is it really the roots that the two countries um, come from, and how different those roots are when it comes to thinking about this community versus the individual, this world versus the next world? How do these impact how we do government, what our ideas on structure are, what education should do, what's freedom about, etc.? Just think through those things, because I think China is going to be part of your life for a long, long time. And it's easier for me, anyway, having studied Confucianism, to make sense out of what I hear coming out of China many times, and also to be able to weight what they say relative to the situation. So anyway, I won't say any more about that. I'll leave that to you to ponder. And that's it. All right. So thanks. I hope it was interesting to you. If you have any questions, let me know. And onward and upward.